The night air was cool and crisp, filled with the distant hum of arriving luxury cars and laughter echoing off the marble walls of the city's most exclusive event space. A grand staircase led to the entrance of the gala, a place where champagne flowed endlessly and every diamond had a last name attached to it. Dressed in a sleek, emerald green gown that shimmered under the soft glow of the chandelier above the entrance, Amara Daniels approached with confidence. Her natural curls were pinned into a regal updo, and her heels clicked with the kind of rhythm that announced presence before words did. She reached the top of the steps with her invitation in hand, only to be stopped by a tall, thin man in a black tuxedo with a clipboard and a forced smile. "Ma'am, this entrance is for invited guests only," he said, without looking up. Amara's brow lifted slightly. "I have an invitation." He finally glanced at her, blinked once, then twice, clearly caught off guard. "I see. May I?" "Just a moment," he mumbled, taking the invitation as if it might be fake. He studied it like a forged passport, and then, without a hint of apology, looked behind her, past her. "I'm sorry, there must be some mistake. This is a very high-profile guest list." Amara stayed still. She knew this game. The unspoken assumption, the coded language. She had faced it before in boardrooms, restaurants, and elevators. But somehow, it always stung a little more when it was dressed in black tie. "I am on that list," she said firmly. The man's expression remained unreadable. "Perhaps you're looking for the staff entrance?" he suggested quietly, with that condescending tone polished by years of exclusion wrapped in politeness. A few heads nearby turned. A white couple behind her, clearly less fashionably dressed, were waved in without question. The woman didn't even present a ticket. Amara took a deep breath. This wasn't about fashion. Or tickets. It was about who people expect to belong, and who they don't. She didn't argue. She didn't raise her voice. She turned without another word, descended the stairs she wasn't meant to climb, and vanished into the shadows of the waiting cars. But as she slipped into the back seat of a sleek black sedan, she pulled out her phone and made one call. "Yeah," she said into the receiver, voice steady. "Let them finish their dinner. I'll be arriving shortly, as planned. And make sure the host knows who covered half the budget for this entire event." She hung up, adjusted her bracelet, and smiled. Because the next time she stepped into that building, it wouldn't be through the back, it would be to thunderous applause. Back at her penthouse overlooking the skyline, Amara Daniels stood in front of a tall mirror, removing her earrings with slow precision. The city shimmered below her, a chaotic tapestry of ambition, power, and people who still couldn't pronounce her name correctly in meetings. She had built everything from the ground up. No family fortune. No safety net. Just grit, vision, and an unshakable ability to read a room, especially the one she was never supposed to enter. She didn't always wear gowns and pearls. Just 10 years ago, she was working 18-hour shifts at a community nonprofit, fixing broken printers and surviving off vending machine coffee. But even then, she knew how money worked. Not just how to earn it, how to move it, multiply it, and bend it into something that opened doors wider than any resume ever could. Her first tech venture had nearly failed, twice. Investors wouldn't take her seriously. One actually said, "You're smart, but this is a white boy's game." She remembered his name. She remembered all their names. Then she built her own fund. Quietly, deliberately. By the time they noticed, she was already buying into companies that once dismissed her. And now here she was, the silent financier behind the city's most prestigious charity gala. Not just a donor. The top donor. But she had insisted on keeping her name anonymous for the press release. She didn't need headlines. She needed moments. Moments like this one, where people who looked through her could finally see clearly who was holding the keys to the kingdom. Her phone buzzed. A short message from the gala coordinator. "Deepest apologies, Ms. Daniels. Security error. Red carpet is ready. Will you be arriving soon?" She replied with a single word, "Now." Her driver was waiting downstairs. But this time, she wouldn't be walking up those stairs alone. She had made one more call that night, to her assistant, asking her to invite a dozen young black girls from her foundation's scholarship program. She wanted them to see her walk through those doors. To see what it looked like when you didn't ask for a seat at the table, you bought the damn table and brought your own chairs. The night wasn't about revenge. It was about visibility. About planting a flag so others could see where power could truly live. As the elevator descended, Amara adjusted her posture, smoothed the fabric of her gown, and exhaled slowly. It was time. Time to walk back into that room, not to fit in, but to stand out, unapologetically. When the black sedan rolled up to the entrance for the second time that night, the valet who had barely glanced at her earlier did a double-take. He stood up straighter this time, hurrying to open the door with the urgency of someone realizing, too late, that they had misjudged a name without even asking for it. Amara stepped out slowly, radiating the kind of calm authority that didn't need words. Her emerald gown shimmered beneath the lights. Her walk was graceful but deliberate, and behind her came 12 young women, all dressed in gowns of their own, their eyes wide, their steps nervous but proud. Some had never been in a building this opulent, let alone through its front door. Inside, the gala was in full swing. Champagne flutes clinked under crystal chandeliers. Laughter filled the corners. And at the far end of the room, on an elevated platform, a massive screen displayed a looping slideshow of donor names. For now, her name was still missing. The man with the clipboard saw her first. His face paled, and he froze for a beat too long. By the time he stepped toward her, another figure had already intervened, the gala host, a prominent city philanthropist in a navy tuxedo, moving fast, arms open, voice just a little too loud with excitement. "Ms. Daniels," he exclaimed, as if they had been friends forever. "We are so honored to have you here tonight. What a tremendous surprise." She didn't smile. "Not yet." "Not much of a surprise," she said evenly, "since I donated $2 million toward tonight's medical initiative. I believe that qualifies me as your lead contributor." The man laughed nervously, motioning toward the staff. "We had a mix-up at the door. Terribly embarrassing. I assure you." "I'm sure you're embarrassed," Amara said. Her voice was calm, but the edges were steel. "Especially since I was turned away in front of guests. No ID check. No clarification. Just the assumption that I didn't belong." Now people were turning. Heads craned. A few guests whispered, connecting the dots. The name. The entrance. The posture of a woman who had no interest in blending in. The host cleared his throat. Would you like to say a few words before the dinner begins?" "Now," she smiled. "I'd be delighted." Moments later, she stood at the podium, the spotlight warming her face, the ballroom hushed. And when she spoke, it wasn't about the check she had written or the insult at the door. It was about legacy. About visibility. About what it means to open doors not just for yourself, but for everyone who has ever been told, you don't belong. Behind her, the slideshow changed. Her name appeared across the massive screen in bold, gold letters. Amara Daniels, Gala benefactor. And below that, by her request. In honor of the girls who are always told no. A standing ovation followed. But for Amara, the real triumph was behind her, 12 young girls beaming, their futures forever shifted by what they had just witnessed. The applause faded, and the ballroom settled into a hushed reverence as Amara stepped down from the stage. She didn't return to the crowd. She walked toward a round table near the front, one that had been marked reserved but left curiously empty all evening. The name cards at each seat were unfamiliar. Donors, maybe. Or executives. But now, one by one, they were quietly removed by staff at the host's whispered command. Replaced by new ones, names handwritten quickly and neatly, the girls who came with her. The 12 scholarship recipients took their places, giggling softly at first, unsure if they were even allowed to sit on chairs that plush or eat food with that many forks. But Amara sat with them, at the center, anchoring them with grace and calm certainty. Around them, whispers continued. Some were supportive, impressed, even awed. Others simmered with discomfort, the kind that happens when power shifts in real time, and some are forced to re-examine the quiet prejudices they've dressed in elegance for decades. Across the room, the man with the clipboard hovered in the shadows, no longer sure where to stand. Meanwhile, the host of the gala watched from a distance, smiling too hard, too often, trying to recalibrate his public posture. He had invited CEOs and trust fund babies, politicians and investors, and yet none of them had electrified the room the way this woman and her young guests had. Dinner was served, but Amara barely touched hers. She was too busy answering the girls' questions. One wanted to start a skincare line. Another, aerospace engineering. A third shyly confessed she had never seen a woman who looked like her give a speech in a room like this. Amara didn't give them clichés. She gave them strategy. You have to know how they think, she said. You have to master their language, then rewrite it in your voice. A photographer came by, eager to capture the unexpected tableau, a black woman in couture, surrounded by ambitious, radiant girls of color, seated in the very heart of a space design without them in mind. The photo would go viral by morning. As dessert was cleared and the evening's live auction began, Amara leaned back in her chair. She wasn't here to prove anything. Not anymore. This table wasn't a trophy. It was a beginning, for every girl who had been overlooked, underestimated, or turned away. The spotlight had already moved on. But it didn't matter. She had never needed it. Now, she was the light dot at a table just across the ballroom. Whispers slithered like smoke between glasses of wine and forced smiles. The old guard, donors with double-barreled last names and inherited clout, watched Amara's table with tight expressions. A woman in pearls leaned toward her husband, murmuring, "She made a donation, sure, but this display? It's dramatic." He didn't reply. His eyes were fixed on Amara, brows low in thought. She was rewriting the room without raising her voice, and that unnerved him more than if she had stormed the gates. The host of the gala made the rounds, stopping to flatter and smooth, trying to keep the evening elegant. But the mood had shifted. Something unspoken was happening, not just a gesture, but a redistribution of attention, of relevance, of who the evening was really about. At Amara's table, laughter bloomed. The girls were radiant now, unafraid. When the dessert course arrived, they didn't look around for permission to begin. They belonged here, and they knew it. One of the gala board members, a silver-haired man who had helped organize the event for over 20 years, made his way to Amara. He offered his hand, not hesitantly, but with something bordering on respect. "I owe you an apology," he said. She tilted her head slightly, intrigued. "I was part of the conversation that kept your name anonymous. We thought a large anonymous donor added mystery to the campaign. Now I see. It only preserved our comfort." Amara considered that. Then shook his hand. "It's not the apology that matters," she said. "It's what you do with it." He nodded. "What I'd like to do is open up a seat on our board, for someone you recommend. One of your girls. Or several." A pause. "That," she said, "is a start." At the podium, the auctioneer struggled to maintain the audience's attention. Everyone's eyes were elsewhere now. That night, the biggest deal wasn't a painting or a vacation package. It was the quiet dismantling of an old narrative. No one could pretend not to see it anymore. Amara Daniels had arrived. And she wasn't alone. By the time the string quartet played its final note and the guests began to drift toward the valet line, the energy in the gala was no longer champagne slick and predictable. It had changed. Subtly, but permanently. People weren't talking about the silent auction, or the celebrity who made a brief appearance. They were talking about Amara Daniels. Some whispered. Some praised. A few dismissed. But no one ignored. The young girls she brought had left a trail of astonishment in their wake. Donors and board members stopped to ask them about their dreams, handing out business cards, offering internships with the thinly veiled urgency of people trying to catch up to a moment they hadn't seen coming. Amara didn't stay for the final toast. She had made her statement long before the last clink of crystal. Instead, she quietly ushered the girls into waiting cars, hugging each one and reminding them not to shrink for anyone, especially not in rooms they were told weren't built for them. As her own car pulled away from the glittering venue, she took off her heels and finally let herself exhale. Her phone buzzed nonstop, texts from journalists, offers for interviews, photos already flooding social media. Her assistant had to create a press folder within minutes. But none of that mattered to her as much as one message from a private number, a photo of her from the gala stage, captioned simply, "My daughter wants to be like you." She stared at the screen, then at her own reflection in the window. Not the Amara in couture, but the one beneath it, the girl who once handed out flyers for her startup in the rain, who ate dinner from vending machines, who was told no so many times she stopped waiting for permission. The car turned a corner. Behind her, the gala disappeared. Ahead, the city stretched wide and alive. Tomorrow, there would be articles. Tomorrow, there would be headlines. But tonight, there was peace. The kind that comes from walking into a storm and standing still, unshaken. She didn't just rewrite the room. She reclaimed the entire building. A week later, the photo was on the cover of Forbes Women. Amara Daniels, mid-speech, emerald gown catching the light just enough, 12 young girls seated behind her in awe. The headline reads simply, "Redefining Power." But even before the magazine hit stands, the ripple effects of that one night were already reshaping the city. The Gala's organizing committee issued a public statement, naming Amara not only their top donor but their new equity advisor, a title she hadn't asked for but accepted, on one condition, that every future event reserve seats for young leaders from underserved communities. Not as charity, she had said. As future partners. The man who had dismissed her at the door? He was let go quietly, with a press release about realigning internal policies. Amara didn't gloat. She never needed revenge, only recognition of reality. But the real impact happened in smaller, quieter places. One of the girls who attended the gala was invited to speak at her high school, the first time a student ever addressed the faculty directly. Another launched a YouTube channel about women in tech. And one simply changed her phone background to that photo of Amara, saying, "If she can be in that room, I can too." Weeks passed, and the story began appearing in podcasts, talk shows, LinkedIn think pieces. Not just as inspiration, but as a challenge. Who else were we turning away from our doors without even looking? Who else had already earned a seat but was being asked to wait? Amara received invitations from every direction: TED Talks, Harvard panels, startup incubators, women's leadership summits. But she declined most. Her focus remained where it always had been, not performing success, but planning it. And then came the final twist. The gala's host, the very man who had fumbled to welcome her when it was already too late, invited her to co-chair next year's event. He offered full control over the guest list, the program, the venue. She paused only for a moment before replying. "Only if it's in a different building." He was confused. "But it's tradition." Amara smiled. "Exactly. Because some rooms don't need to be re-entered, they need to be replaced." And Amara Daniels didn't just walk into the gala as a top donor. She walked out as a symbol of something bigger. A reminder that the most powerful person in the room might be the one you tried to keep out.